It's my very great pleasure to introduce Bishop Olivia to you. Some of you will know her from her parish ministry in the Dorchester and Buckingham areas, her time as the Oxford Parish Development Advisor and as Archdeacon of Berkshire. And she is, you don't need me really to tell you this, she's the first female bishop in the Oxford Diocese, but she's chair of the Partnership in World Mission and the diocesan lead on environmental issues and probably lots of other things. But those of you who regularly view the diocesan website will know that Bishop Olivia has just taken delivery of a rather nice looking electric car, and she's also given the first of 4 short talks on the environment, and I can thoroughly recommend the first one to you. Please, if you have access to the diocesan website, please do take the time to listen to that. The Bishop started life working as a teacher and in international development, including working for Oxfam in Somalia. So she is just the person to talk to us about the 5 marks of mission.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that generous introduction. Thank you, Maureen, too, for inviting me to talk at this AGM. I'm so sorry that we're not cosily in Benson Village Hall. And I'm sorry that we weren't able to have a Eucharist together in Bicester. I think both of those were earlier plans. But here we are on Zoom, and Zoom's a wonderful thing, as some of us know well and others are just discovering. If you want to comment on anything I'm saying, do use the chat function in the bottom of your screen. Just click on the chat box and put comments in. It's always interesting to see how people are sort of getting on with the content. One of the things, of course, about Zoom is that we all save on carbon, and Jeff's already talked about how the expenses have gone down because nobody's driving anywhere, which is a good thing for the planet, as well as a good thing for our pockets and our budget. I'm very aware that I'm talking to an amazing group of women from a huge variety of different backgrounds and different experiences. And some of you will be extremely familiar with the territory I'm going to cover, talking about the 5 marks of mission. And for others, maybe you haven't thought about it so much. I wasn't really going to spend a lot of time on telling you when-we stories about Somalia or Djibouti or Senegal or any of the other places I've lived in Africa. But I just really wanted to cross over the 5 marks of mission sort of territory and talk a little bit about the Partnership in World Mission, the council for which I'm chairing in the Oxford Diocese. And then to, with Jenny's help, to put us into little discussion groups so that we might just have a chance to chew over together something of what I've said, and then come back at the end for a plenary discussion when we can all kind of chip in our ideas and perspectives. And I hope that might make for a rich conversation. Some of you, of course, as I've said, are going to be very familiar with this, but just a bit of background. The 5 marks of mission were formulated in 1984 as a guiding mission statement for the Anglican Communion, and they're used very widely across the world, across the Anglican diocese and in all sorts of organisations which are connected with them, as a way of thinking about what God's mission encompasses in the world. So between them, they cover very cleverly the whole gospel message, I think. So I'm going to go through them. The first one is to proclaim the good news of the kingdom. This work of proclamation. This is a very, very key bit of what we do as Christians, and it happens whenever we notice and tell where we've seen God at work in our lives and in the lives of all those that we partner with or accompany or help or have to do. It happens every time we share what the Spirit's saying to us, and that's when we're thinking and praying and reflecting on God's message to us in all the different ways in which it comes to us, and when we're actually speaking about that. And it happens when we rejoice together, as we would, of course, have been doing if we had been meeting in person and sharing in liturgy and in the Eucharist. So proclaiming the good news is the first one. The second one is teaching, baptizing and nurturing new believers. Now, this happens when we share reflections that deepen our discipleship, when we share what we know with each other, when we listen and absorb teaching from elsewhere, when we share together what we're experiencing and learning on our individual journeys of faith, and we share what tools we've found to help us. It happens when we read the Bible together, when we pray and encourage each other. And of course, it happens every time we accompany somebody who's newer in the faith than us, and when we help them along the journey to a greater depth and maturity of faith, knowing that none of us is the finished deal, and we're all on a journey in this, and some of us are taking baby steps and some of us are a little further along the way, but actually there's going to be nothing finalized about this until we get to the other side of the Jordan. The third one is responding to human need in loving service, and this is an area in which I know the Mothers Union excels, and it happens every time we become aware of need and we make or encourage in others a compassionate and courageous response to it. Sometimes it's very simple to meet a need. We have the resources, we offer them to the person who's in need. Sometimes it's much more complicated than that, as we'll know sometimes from trying to help in situations which are complex, not easy to get into, where people are perhaps resistant to recognizing their need, where sometimes we come at it from a point of view of superiority, or we are the people who have and they have not, and there's an inequality in what we're trying to do. But the way in which we do this is always about relationship. That's where it starts, that's where it finishes, actually. So the response to human need, although it might be something material, is always rooted in relationship and in our understanding of the equality of relationship between us. The fourth one is seeking to transform unjust structures of society. And this happens whenever we educate or inform ourselves and other people about the impact of these structures. And when we engage in advocacy, in campaigning, and of course also in prayer, because that is the energy behind any sort of transformation. In MU terms, the 16 days of action on gender-based violence is a great example of that happening. And that, of course, exemplifies a piece of action on a particularly crucial issue and brings in a huge community of people, much wider than the MU. And the fifth one is one particularly close to my heart, which is striving to safeguard the integrity of all creation and sustaining and renewing the life of the earth. And that happens when we share responsibility for our planet, when we tell stories, when we build awareness, pray, when we support action, when we take and encourage environmental action ourselves at every level. And that involves looking at every single aspect of our lives, our homes, the source of our energy, supply, the way that we travel, where we invest our money. I was really interested to hear about your investments, some of them, a lot of them, I think, through CCLA, which has got an environmental or socially responsible investment portfolio, which I hope your money is invested in. But also, I think a lot of organisations are becoming more and more conscious of where they are investing their assets in order that they do good and not harm to the environment and to the wider social fabric of our world. So it's a huge area of concern, that. So here we have 5 marks of mission. So proclaim the good news of the kingdom, teach and baptize and nurture new believers, respond to human need by loving service, transform the unjust structures of society. That includes challenging violence of every kind and pursuing peace and reconciliation, and the safeguarding of the integrity of creation, sustaining and renewing the life of the earth. Now, the thing about the 5 marks of mission is that they're not a shopping list. They're much more like a dance. I think I see them as one of those wonderful country dances in which the dancers create interweaving patterns as they strip the willow, form teapots, circles, sides, stars, do-si-dos. I'm sure that some of us have danced those dances, and they always make my heart lift when I get a chance to do that, even though my knees are getting a bit creaky. And we'll know that sometimes the pace of those dances is fast and energetic, and sometimes it's slower and more stately. But they're dances in which all are included and everybody gets a chance to do everything. You'll know from the structures of some of those dances that, you know, you might start in 2 rows and you might start as a couple quite far down the row, but you progress up to it and then you get to take the lead. So it is something in which we all have a part to play, and we all get a chance to do something important. And the 5 marks of mission, I think, work together in that way. They're an integrity. You can't pick them off. Having said that, there are some churches which aren't able to see the 5 marks of mission as a dance, and they tend to look at them perhaps as a list of options. So you'll find churches and organisations, in fact, others, which focus on the 1st and 2nd marks. They focus on proclamation and teaching, baptising, nurturing faith. And you'll find churches which are focused on what they can do to meet the needs they see around them. So they're very focused on their food banks, credit unions, debt counselling, night shelters, all manner of, you know, wonderful things. But that's the focus of their activity. They serve their communities. And you'll find churches which see their mission as being to challenge the systems which create the conditions where people are in need. So they will maybe be focused on campaigning, marching, letter writing, signing petitions. Back in the day, I can remember Make Poverty History and Trade Justice and all of that. And we put on our rainbow-coloured scarves and we marched to Parliament and those kind of things. All, you know, really important forms of action. And then you'll find eco-churches, which find their identity in focusing on the environmental crisis and the care of God's world. And in fact, most of our churches do a mixture of those things, but the spread tends to be a bit uneven, and you definitely find, you know, places which have a focus more on one aspect of that than the other. But of course, what I want to say is that we can't leave anything out, because it's all of God. It's all the gospel, and the gospel is a unity. It's not just the bits that we happen to be drawn to or like. I've been the Bishop of Reading now for nearly a year, and it's a really interesting role to be in, because I have the wonderful opportunity to relate very closely to the parishes and the clergy and ministers in Berkshire, the part of the world that I am the area bishop for, but also to be connected into and lead on some of the things which our diocese is very engaged with. And as a diocese, we have, you're probably aware, a common vision, which is about being a more Christ-like church for the sake of God's world. That's the key phrase. It's not just to make ourselves feel good. It's for the sake of God's world. And I think it's a beautiful and elegant vision, because it provokes very deep questions about the way in which we do things. Not what we do, but the way in which we do them. So we're encouraged to be more contemplative, more compassionate, and more courageous in the way we do things. and to be generally more Christ-like in everything that we do. And I find the 5 marks of mission are a great framework against which to check that we are covering the whole gospel in what we do. So as Mary's already said in her introduction, I have a couple of responsibilities which I hold for the whole diocese, and they intersect, I think, with the work of the Mothers' Union, not only here in this diocese, but across all of the Mothers' Unions in the UK, but also across the world. The first thing that I'm very concerned about is the environmental emergency, which has to be a concern for us all. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, plastic pollution, air pollution. Did you know that today, 8th of October, is a Clean Air Day? That's a day in which worldwide people are concerned about air pollution. And the Mothers' Union has very close to its heart a concern for families, families here, families across the globe. And the issue of environment is an issue which, if we don't tackle it, is going to affect our children and our grandchildren to a really extreme degree. It's no exaggeration to say an existential crisis, because the life of our planet in the next 3-4 decades will change completely if we don't tackle the environmental crisis from now. We don't have the leisure time to sit and think about it or talk about it. We have to take action. And I'm pleased to see that the Prime Minister, in his address to the virtual party conference, actually did highlight some of the concerns which we've got to be addressing in relation to the generation of energy, particularly. And as we build up to hosting the COP26 talks next year, postponed from this year, that's a pity, but understandable, where we've got to make sure that we are giving leadership as a nation within the global community of nations in such a way that everybody will be signing up and renewing their pledges to greater ambition, greater commitment to the targets they've got to reach, and some particularly crucial technical issues which they failed to make progress on last time, which we've absolutely got to nail this time. I know that across Africa, certainly where I'm familiar with it, the MU branches are working really hard on some grassroots things like tree planting and vegetable gardening and soil and water conservation and seed banks, preserving biodiversity, all sorts of very important grassroots actions which are making a difference to preserving our environment. So I would want to say that the care of our planet is, or should be, a watermark which runs through all of our lives and activities. And I say that at every opportunity that I can, so I'm very pleased to have a platform to say it on today. But the second portfolio that I hold, which Mary mentioned, is to chair the Council for Partnership in World Mission. And I'm delighted that the Mothers' Union, with its worldwide membership and concerns, is one of the mission agencies with which we connect. I don't know if you would recognise the characterisation of MU as a mission agency, but we put you into that pot, certainly, and that's the way that we would want to deal with the Mothers' Union and our relationships with it. Because the MU's got a spread which is really impressive. And I do know from first-hand experience of the MU in parts of Africa how very energetic and vibrant and inspiring it is. What a force for good it is, both in the lives and of the church communities, but importantly in the life of the community around. It's a fantastic organisation which I've got a great deal of respect for. The Council for Partnership in World Mission is a Diocese of Oxford council which does what it says on the tin. The problem is that what it says on the tin is rather vague, and it doesn't help us to work out what we should be doing as a council. So what I've been doing in the very short time that I've been chairing it is to think about the relationships between PWM and our UK-based mission agencies, about 9 or 10 of them that we connect with, and the Mothers Union, both local and worldwide, and our 3 link dioceses in South Africa, South India and Sweden, and our 130 or so parishes which have got overseas links, and the dozen or so bishops from other parts of the Anglican Communion who we were due to host at the Lambeth Conference this year, now sadly postponed until 2022. And the question I'm asking is, how should we connect to each other? And how can we learn from and encourage each other? How can we build community with each other, this wider sense of international community? How can we pray for each other? And what part does each of us play in God's holistic and integral mission in the world? And I think in all of that, we should have scope for an immensely rich conversation. So I'm hoping that we may have a little bit of conversation together within ourselves. But whatever you come up with will be part of a wider conversation, which is being encouraged across all of those very different groupings and individuals representing the gospel and its outworkings all over the world. When the PWM executive got together in the spring of this year with the mission agencies, and Marion Gunning was there representing the Mothers Union, we talked about the 5 marks of mission, and we talked about how each of our organisations was working on the various strands. And we saw together that mission is multifaceted. So what used to be the 17th, 18th or 19th century societies of missionaries who went out to far-flung parts of the globe from England, the centre of the universe, to convert the heathen, is all changed. What it is now, what it's become, is a really vibrant partnership in the gospel in many different parts of the world. And of course at home as well, which we mustn't forget. And we're all engaged in God's dance. That lovely image of the Trinity as the perichoresis, that divine dance of God, which incorporates the whole of creation and incorporates all of human activity, because we're all caught up in it. So I want very much to encourage in all of us a sense that we're together in God's enterprise of love, both at home and across the world, as we join in that divine dance. So it's a question, I think, of joining up our conversation, our actions, our activities, and our prayer, and creating together, if you like, beautiful and intricate patterns and connections. And bearing in mind that we can't separate those 5 marks of mission, and we can't neglect any of them because they're one, and they're made one in Christ, and Christ is the one who reconciles to God all things in himself.